Hello and welcome to the English Speaking Studio. I'm Jack, your co-host.
And I'm Lucy.
All right, get ready, because we're going to take a deep dive into something I know you're passionate about. Leveling up your English speaking skills.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about just textbook English here. We're talking about the kind of English that you can use confidently, whether you're at work, traveling the world,
Right.
or just chatting with friends.
Right.
We've got some amazing insights to share with you today from an expert who has helped tons of English learners just like you.
It's so interesting. So many people get stuck thinking that they need to master all these grammar rules or memorize a zillion vocabulary words before they can even open their mouths to speak.
Yeah, it can be so overwhelming, right?
Totally.
It's like, where do you even start?
Exactly. And that's what's so fascinating about what the expert had to say. They suggested that we should actually flip the script completely.
Yeah.
Instead of starting with reading and writing, they said we should actually take a listening first approach.
So ditch the textbooks and just tune in. That's pretty unexpected.
I know, right? But if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. How did we all learn our first language?
Yeah.
I mean, we spent months, even years, just listening to the sounds and rhythms of speech before we ever even looked at a book.
It's true. It's almost like we're hardwired for learning languages through our ears.
Exactly. And there's actually recent research in neuroscience that supports this. Studies have shown that listening to spoken language activates specific areas of the brain that are crucial for language acquisition.
Right.
So when you're immersing yourself in listening to English, you're essentially priming your brain for success.
That's incredible. So where should we be directing our ears? What should we be listening to?
Well, the good news is we live in a world that's overflowing with authentic English content. You've got podcasts like yours, movies, TV shows, even YouTube videos.
Oh, and don't forget music.
Yeah.
Learning with lyrics can be so effective and fun.
Yeah, absolutely. The key is to find something that you're genuinely interested in, something that you'll actually enjoy listening to. That way, learning feels less like a chore and more like a pleasure.
I love that. This is making me rethink my whole approach to language learning.
Okay.
So we're listening at the storm. What's next?
Well, the expert highlights the importance of what they call automating your vocabulary.
Automating vocabulary.
Yeah, it's basically about moving beyond just recognizing a word to actually using it effortlessly in conversation.
So it's kind of taking that word off the shelf and putting it into action.
Exactly. And they suggested a really simple but powerful technique for doing this. They call it repeat and juggle.
Repeat and juggle. Okay, I'm intrigued. Break it down for us.
So it's all about repetition and variation. So first you listen to a word or phrase and you repeat it out loud. Then you juggle it by changing a word in the phrase or swapping in a synonym or maybe even shifting the tense.
Got it. Can you give us an example?
Sure, let's say you're learning the phrase, I'm interested in learning English. You could juggle it by saying, I'm passionate about learning English, or I was interested in learning English last year. Or, I'll be interested in continuing to learn English in the future.
So you're basically playing with the language and experimenting with different ways to use that target vocabulary.
Exactly. And the more you practice this, the more those words and phrases become second nature to you. You'll find yourself using them without even thinking about it.
That's awesome. And I know there's this really cool tool out there that can actually help with this whole repeat and juggle process.
You're thinking of the Woodpecker Learning app, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It offers all these interactive exercises based on this very technique.
I've heard great things about it. It's like having a personal language coach right in your pocket. Okay, I'm already feeling way more confident about my vocabulary. What else can we do to improve our fluency?
Well, the expert emphasized the power of thinking in chunks.
Chunks, like bite-sized pieces of language.
Exactly. Chunks are groups of words that naturally go together, like collocations, idiomatic expressions, even those little filler words we use all the time.
So instead of building sentences like word by word, we're using these prefabricated blocks of language.
I like that analogy. Think about it this way. When you first learn how to drive, you don't focus on individual actions like pressing the gas pedal or turning the steering wheel. You learn to execute all of those actions as one fluid sequence.
That makes so much sense. So how can we start incorporating chunks into our English speaking?
We'll start by paying attention to how native speakers naturally group words together. Listen for those common collocations like make a decision or take a break. Notice those idiomatic expressions like piece of cake or hit the road.
I love those. Those are the phrases that really make you sound like a natural speaker.
Exactly. And they can dramatically improve your fluency. because you're thinking in phrases, not individual words. For example, instead of saying, I went to the store to purchase food, you could simply say, I went grocery shopping. It's shorter, it's smoother, and it sounds way more natural.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together now. We're listening to authentic content, automating our vocabulary, and thinking in chunks. It's like a recipe for fluency.
It really is. And here's where it gets even more interesting. The expert emphasizes that fluency isn't just about speaking quickly, it's about conveying your message clearly and confidently.
Yeah. And I think a lot of English learners struggle with that confidence piece.
Yeah.
You know, it can be really intimidating to put yourself out there, especially when you're worried about making mistakes.
Absolutely. And the expert's advice for overcoming this fear is so simple, but it's also incredibly powerful. They said, push your comfort zone.
I love that. It's so easy to stay in that safe little bubble where everything feels comfortable and familiar. But real growth happens when we challenge ourselves,
Yeah,
when we push those boundaries.
exactly. It's like working out a muscle. If you always lift the same weight, you're going to plateau. But if you gradually increase the weight, you're going to build strength and endurance. It's the same with language learning.
So how can we apply this push your comfort zone principle to English speaking?
Well, it could be something as small as recording yourself speaking for a few minutes each day, or maybe it's joining an online conversation group where you can interact with other English learners.
I've also heard that shadowing can be a really effective technique. You basically listen to a native speaker and try to mimic their pronunciation and intonation.
Yeah, shadowing's brilliant. It's like having a personal pronunciation coach right there in your ear. And the beauty of all of these techniques is that they force you to confront those fears and get comfortable with the process of making mistakes.
Because, let's be honest, mistakes are inevitable. It's how we
Yes.
learn and grow, right?
Absolutely. The expert actually encourages learners to embrace their mistakes as valuable learning opportunities. Every time you stumble over a word or phrase, you're basically identifying an area where you can improve.
So it's all about shifting our mindset from this fear of failure to a curiosity about learning.
Exactly. And as you become more comfortable with making mistakes, you'll find that your confidence grows exponentially.
That's a really great point. I think that's such an important message for English learners to hear. Okay, so we've got all these great techniques for improving our pronunciation, our fluency, and our vocabulary. But how do we make sure that we're getting consistent exposure to natural spoken English?
Well, the expert suggests being really mindful about the tools and resources that you choose for your learning journey. It's all about immersing yourself in authentic English content.
So stepping outside those textbook dialogues and classroom scenarios.
Precisely. While those can be helpful for building a foundation, they often present a rather sanitized version of the language.
Yeah, it's like the difference between watching a cooking show and actually getting in the kitchen and whipping something up yourself.
I love that analogy. To truly master English speaking, you need to experience the language in its natural habitat.
So what are some good sources for this authentic English content?
Well, the world's your oyster. The expert recommends exploring a variety of different formats. You can tune into news broadcasts, current affairs shows, even those late-night talk shows.
Those can be a bit tricky. With all the fast-paced banter and slang, though, right?
They can be challenging at first, yeah. But that's where the subtitles come in handy. Start with the training wheels on, and gradually wean yourself off as your listening skills improve.
And don't forget about movies and TV shows. They're a fantastic way to absorb natural language
Yeah.
and pick up on those cultural nuances.
Absolutely. And this is where that Woodpecker Learning app we mentioned earlier really shines. They have a vast library of videos with interactive subtitles that let you dive deep into the language. You can tap on any word to get a definition, hear the pronunciation, and even see examples of how it's used in other contexts.
That sounds like a dream come true for any English learner.
It really is a game changer. And it ties back to what we were discussing earlier about embracing mistakes. The app provides a safe and supportive environment where you can experiment with the language without that fear of judgment.
Yeah, I think that's so important, especially for learners who might feel self-conscious about speaking up in a classroom setting.
Exactly. The app really empowers you to learn at your own pace and on your own terms.
So we've covered a lot of ground here today, from the power of listening to the importance of pushing our comfort zones and choosing the right tools for our learning journey. It's been an incredibly insightful deep dive.
It really has. And I think the key takeaway from all of this is that improving your English speaking skills, it's not about finding some magic formula or some shortcut. It's about consistent effort, embracing challenges, and finding joy in the process.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
And speaking of finding joy, I think it's time for a little fun. The expert shared a quick quiz that can help you test your knowledge of some common English idioms and expressions.
Ooh.
Are you up for the challenge?
Absolutely, let's do it. Okay, hit us with it.
All right, question number 1. What does it mean to kick the bucket?
To kick the bucket. I think that means to pass away, right? You got it. That's 1 point for you.
Yes.
All right, next question. What does it mean to spill the beans?
To spill the beans. Oh, that means to reveal a secret.
You're on a roll.
Huh?
2 points.
This is fun.
Okay, last one. What does it mean to bite off more than you can chew?
To bite off more than you can chew. I think it means to take on too much. To try to do something that's too difficult.
You nailed it. 3 points.
I'm on fire.
You aced the quiz. Looks like you've got a good grasp of those tricky idioms.
Thanks. I've been practicing. Okay, so we've talked about the importance of listening, automating our vocabulary, and thinking in chunks. We've even tested our knowledge of idioms. But one thing I'm still curious about is how to deal with the fear of making mistakes. You know, that feeling of self-consciousness that can hold us back from speaking up. That's a really good point. And the expert actually addressed this directly. They emphasize that it's totally natural to feel nervous or hesitant when speaking a new language. Everyone makes mistakes. It's part of the learning process.
I know you're right, but it can be so hard to shake that feeling of self-doubt.
I get it. But the expert offered some really practical advice for overcoming this fear. They said it's all about changing your perspective. Instead of viewing mistakes as failures, try to see them as opportunities for growth and learning.
So basically, we need to reframe our thinking and embrace those mistakes as stepping stones on our path to fluency.
Exactly. Every time you make a mistake, you're actually getting one step closer to mastering that aspect of the language.
I like that. So it's not about avoiding mistakes altogether. It's about learning from them.
Precisely. And the expert suggested a few specific strategies for putting this into practice. One thing they recommended is to record yourself speaking and then listen back to it. This can help you identify areas where you need to improve and also track your progress over time.
That's a good idea. It's kind of like watching game film, but for language learning.
Exactly. Another strategy they suggested is to find a language partner, someone you can practice speaking with regularly, ideally a native speaker or someone with a high level of fluency.
I think that's crucial, having those real-life conversations where you can get feedback and support.
Absolutely. And finally, the expert emphasized the importance of being patient with yourself. Language learning takes time and effort. There will be ups and downs along the way, but the key is to stay persistent and never give up on your goals.
I think that's really important. Sometimes it's easy to get discouraged, especially when you feel like you're not progressing as quickly as you'd like.
It's totally normal to feel that way, but remember that everyone learns at their own pace. And that progress isn't always linear. There will be times when you feel like you're making huge strides, and other times when you feel like you're stuck in a rut. But the important thing is to keep moving forward, even if it's just one small step at a time.
Yeah, I think consistency is key. Even if you can only dedicate a few minutes each day, it's better than nothing.
Absolutely. And the expert actually suggested a few simple things that you can do to incorporate English practice into your daily routine, like listening to podcasts while you're commuting, or watching English language movies with subtitles, or even just reading a few pages of an English book before bed.
Those are great ideas.
Yeah.
I think it's all about finding ways to make learning fun and enjoyable.
Exactly. The more you enjoy the process, the more likely you are to stick with it.
Makes sense. Well, this has been such an insightful conversation. I'm feeling so inspired to take my English speaking skills to the next level.
I'm glad to hear that. And I think the expert's final piece of advice was particularly powerful. They said, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Speak up, even if you're not confident. The more you practice, the better you'll become.
I love that. It's a reminder that we need to embrace those opportunities to speak, even if it feels scary at first.
Exactly. And remember, the world is full of people who are eager to connect with you and learn from your unique perspective.
That's so true. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of these amazing insights with us today.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
I know our listeners are going to get so much out of this deep dive,
I hope so.
and I hope you'll join us again soon.
I'd love to.
All right. So we've talked about a lot of awesome strategies for boosting your English speaking skills.
We really have. From listening to pushing your comfort zone, embracing those mistakes. We even had a little fun with an idiom quiz.
Yeah, that was fun.
But before we wrap up, there's one more thing I wanted to emphasize that the expert brought up. They talked about how important patience and persistence are on this language learning journey.
Yeah, it's so easy to get discouraged, especially when you hit those plateaus or feel like you're not progressing as quickly as you'd hoped.
Right, it's natural to feel that way. But remember, language learning is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, it's all about those small, consistent steps that you take over time.
Exactly. And the expert actually shared a beautiful analogy. They said to think of language learning like planting a seed.
Oh, I like
You
that.
nurture it with consistent practice, you water it with exposure to the language, and you give it plenty of sunshine through positive self-talk.
And just like a seed, it takes time to sprout and grow. You might not see those results immediately,
Right.
but with patience and persistence, you'll eventually witness the fruits of your labor.
I love that.
Yeah, it's such a powerful image. It reminds us that we need to trust the process and celebrate those small victories along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Every new word you learn, every conversation you have, every time you push yourself outside of your comfort zone, those are all reasons to celebrate.
Yeah, because those small wins fuel our motivation and
Mm.
keep us moving forward.
Exactly. And speaking of motivation, the expert left us with a really thought-provoking question. They asked, what one small step will you take today to nurture your English-speaking skills?
It's a call to action, right?
Yeah.
It reminds us that we have the power to shape our own learning journey.
Absolutely. Whether it's listening to a podcast during your commute, or practicing a few phrases with a language partner, or even just giving yourself permission to make mistakes, every step counts.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. It's about taking ownership of our learning, embracing the journey, and never losing sight of that passion for the English language.
Couldn't agree more. So to all of you listening out there, we say keep that fire burning, keep exploring, keep experimenting, keep celebrating those wins no matter how small.
Because with dedication and a little bit of fun, you can achieve anything you set your mind to. We have no doubt that you will become confident, fluent English speakers.
Absolutely.
And remember, we're always here to cheer you on every step of the way.
Always.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep those English muscles working and keep that passion for language alive.
Happy learning, everyone.